Welcome to section 5, part 7. Previous part, we got up to creating our entities. So we've created the groups, we've calculated all the locations we're going to need for our group and entities. And now we want to start actually spawning the entity actors. So let's continue. So now we need to get the entity data, which is what we just did. So I'm going to
Play this.
and then the index will just be I for this one. Renamed it. Rename it. So the group, we didn't care where they spawn. For the entities we do, so we need to create a transform for them. So I'm just going to create a blank transform. And I'm just going to update the location of it. I'm not too worried. We're not worried about rotation and scale because that's just going to be 0 and default scale. We're just updating the location. Our spawn locations. And now this is where we need to get the entity that we're going to spawn. And if you recall, we created an entities map in our settings. So let's have a look at that. So this is our entities map here in our developer settings or entity settings. And this is what links the type to the, so the type is what's in the data, and this is the actual class to spawn. So we're going to have to get our entity settings. And then we want to find our, in the map, we want to find the class. And this will be a pointer to the pointer. Need to validate that pointer now. And we're actually going to use spawn actor deferred. But we want to assign some settings before we finish spawning. We need to load our soft class pointer there. We want to spawn it at our position. The owner will be, right. I want to spawn it at our spawn position and bring this down. The owner will be this, and the instigator will be get pawn. And then we're just going to pass through some collision. The spawn actor collision handling method always spawn. Actually, I might put it to adjust, but always spawn. I'm going to wrap that in an if. So we're getting a bit in depth here, so what I might do is at the start of this function, I might just do some checks. So I'll get a reference to the asset manager, to our settings, and we'll do a get world check as well. Yeah, so we'll just do get rid of that. A little bit better. That's all we can do for now. Actually, I'll change mine. I don't want to put that in an if statement. Take that out. Sorry. And then here is we'll check that it is good. No. So here is where we need to do anything to do with our new entity that we're spawning. So one thing we're going to have to do is create the entity component that we created. I'm just going to call it create entity components because we'll have more later, and this is where we'll add them. The other thing we'll do here is we'll find a team, and I'm just going to, that's be a reminder for when we do create the teams, we'll we'll be doing that. We'll need to also assign, when we come on to do AI stuff, well, this is where we'll assign the AI controller, initialize all that. And then another thing we're going to need to do is tell the group what, like give the group that we created, we want to tell it what its entities. So up here somewhere, probably at the start, before the group loop here, we'll just put it above that. We're just going to create an array of actors and we'll call it group entities. And then that group entities we'll update that. Like so, and then outside of this loop, that check actually, we're going to just do, it's a U gameplay static, so that include the gameplay statics.h at the top, and finish spawn actor. So we did the actor, spawn actor deferred, this was what finishes it, and we just pass the actor that we're finishing and the position. So, and then it's finished spawning, so our player entities, we can add that to that. That's for the player controller. Just a raw list of it's the entities that the player owns. And now we're going to have to create entity components, and we're going to pass the actor. We haven't created this function yet. We're going to do that. We're going to pass the entity, the entity data to it. We're going to pass its index. If you recall, I talked about index earlier when we were, what were we doing? We're talking about assigning the group leader, and then we're going to pass the group we just spawned. This is so we can update that entity component. So this is all the data that we want to update to the entity component. Create this function. So it was a actor. Entity data, and a forward declaration for that. Oh no, sorry, that's not entity data. That's it. Can be, but so the first thing we want to do is just create the actual component. So that's what we're attaching it to the actor. Give it a name. That created successfully, then we can start initializing it. Register. And then we need to assign all our data that we have here on the entity component. So we're going to need a function for that on the actual component itself. I'll put it at the top since it's what initializes it, and I'll just call it initialize. Z, huh? And back, I'll just copy all of this stuff. The only thing I'll add is the owning player, and we'll just pass the player controller. I'm not going to have it as the entity type or anything. I'll just put keywords on this so we don't conflict with the parameters that we end up signing in here for this stuff. So we need to create variables. These both be replicated. This one will be replicated using. And that's so we can assign data from the data asset to anything. They misinterpreted. So that should initialize our layer component there. Back to our controller. And then we need to do a similar process for the actual group as well. So go back to it. And just on the outside of this group members loop here, so we want to initialize and we're also going to pass the training player group asset and that entities list that we were populating, this one. Create that on the group. We probably should be doing authentication checks too for this. I'll just add that to the entities one as well, because when using replicated properties, you only want to set them on the server, otherwise they won't replicate. That's what we do. So this will be owner, and owner has it. Come back to it. I won't do replicated using. I'm not sure if there's anything I need to do there. Oh, I'll do it later if we need to. The reason why you would use replicated using is you can, when it's assigned, you can run some other functions, set some other variables. So on the entity, a good example would be you'd want a current speed or a current max speed, and you'd also have a default max speed. So you'd, when you the default max speed's assigned in the data, when you assign the data, you update the current max speed to the max speed. That makes sense? I don't know. And our last one, the owner isn't. Entity. And I might actually add ID to this. What is that? That can be by reference. Is the pointer or something. Yep. Obviously we've got some stuff to come back to later, but for the most part this should spawn an actor, assuming all our settings, semicolon there, assuming all our settings are all set right, and got an actor to spawn. Let's give it a go. We'll build, see if we've got any errors. Looks like I got an error here. Yeah, it's just a typo. Good. So I'm just going to check before we go ahead. Now, entity settings. Make sure we do have something in our entities map. Not so. Add I point it to our test character. And second thing I'm going to check is in our entities data. So I am in fact using entity A. That's what links to our character. And have a player start in the map. Should update our start position. Let's see what we get. Do some debugging. I want to check that our loadout manager is starting. Yep. So let's flow this through. Debug game phase. Skipped preload and we didn't get another. Well, that's definitely registering. Getting to registered our player. Got the player loadout. We're going to start a chain of loading, which end at data loaded. So let's those. We have an array of locations now. One location. Just the start location. Much of a check of that, but we'll add more groups later. Let's created the group. Now we should have entity locations. Changed that, didn't work out too good. So that's what's happening, it's getting to here and it's gonna right. Stop that. So after much stuffing around, I ended up coming into groups and checking the group data because the IDs were coming through as valid, but then when I was trying to cast to them in in our generate entity locations, it was just failing, and it was really odd. So it was saying it was valid, and then it wouldn't cast to it. And I checked over all the settings, and I come to the point where I'm like, well, I'm just going to re-add them to the group, and I come in here, and they look like this. Screenshot. Sorry, I didn't think to turn the recording back on at the time, but they look like this, so they were just corrupted, and all I had to do was just reassign them. So I just repointed them. I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe we made a change to something that affected it, but that's all it was. So then when we play, I think speed up our timer on our thing too. So they're spawning in the floor, and if you're wondering why they're doing that, it's because they're not possessed. So they're spawning like an actor or whatever. So we come into our character blueprint and search for it. So auto possess AI. This won't matter once we assign our own AI controller, but we do placed in world or spawned, and it should auto possess, which is the default AI controller. I think that should. Yep. Yeah. So let's just over here and we're about it. Come back to our game state, sorry, and have a timer for our game phase. Game timer. So I set it to 1 so it was readable in the logs there. So I'm just going to set it to 2 or something. Really set it lower, I guess. Reload for that. We don't really have any way to debug our selection yet because we don't have any visualizations or whatever. So we could check it in debug, but let's just do it properly in the next part. What we can do though, before we finish up, is we'll just come down to our entity data groups. I'm going to duplicate this group. I'll leave it as group 2, that's fine. Let's make a larger group, so a couple more guys. And then come back to here, go to loadouts, and let's add a couple more groups. So 2. And just see that our location spawning's working all fine. And that looks good. So you can see it's alternating between 4, 6, 4, and 6. We had it in the loadout. Alright, I'll see you in the next part. Thanks for watching.